often when trust is broken down and we're in that initial confusion, it's the natural thing for an individual or an institution, an organization to kind of hide, right? To
Right.
conceal things, to just not tell the truth.
Right.
And it seems like the damage that does is really hard to overcome. I'm Trisha Taylor.
And I'm Jim Harrington, and this is the Leader's Journey podcast. It's really good to be back today. We've got some really fun things that are happening in the Leader's Journey.
We do,
Uh,
we do, but I just have to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Because your background, right,
uh,
right, is your pool and all your flowers on an incredible spring day. And it just makes me think about the people who are listening, like if you're listening in your car or whatever to the standard podcast, you can't see all this, which is what makes it fun to say. We're on YouTube now. You can go look on our YouTube channel and see Jim's backyard and
mm,
everything that entails.
well, and it's just beginning to bloom. And like in the middle of May, it is like there are 9 different kind of blooming. I love good gardening, being outside. There are about 9 different kind of blooming plants, and
Yeah.
so I'll make sure to do one maybe mid-May out in the backyard.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
our listeners, if you're curious, just run over to YouTube and you can see that.
there
Anyway,
you go.
sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to comment on that.
No worries. So, as our business continues to grow and expand, as our opportunities to serve open up new doors of opportunity, there are 2 things that we're launching this month that are new for us. One of them is that we're going to do a Zoom conversation with anybody who wants to join us. Um, the conversation is going to be about trust. This is the second podcast. Today's the second podcast we've done on trust, and there are going to be a couple of blogs on our website that are about trust. And then anybody who wants to come and have a conversation with Tricia and I about trust and how to maintain it and how to restore it, all those pieces and parts. That's gonna happen. It's going to start on April the 18th, or it's going to be on April the 18th at 10 o'clock. Central Daylight Time. I can't figure that out for the rest of you who live in other time zones. So
Right.
I'm a little learning challenge there, but that's one thing. And then the other is that Tricia and I, along with Robert Creech, Dr. Robert Creech, wrote a book called The Leader's Journey. We wrote it in 2003, and then we put it into practice what we were writing about over about a 14-year period of time. And in 2017, our publishers asked us to do a second edition. The second edition not only includes 3 new chapters, but it includes a whole ton of learning that took place over those 14 years as we were working with congregations and businesses and individuals. And so we're going to do a 6-month book club
Yeah.
where we meet once a month. We're going to divide the book into 6 parts, have everybody read coming to the part. And then if you want to discuss the book with Tricia and I, we'll do that. We're going to start on April the 24th at, again, 10 o'clock Central Daylight Time. And we'll do that for 6 months. And we're really excited about all of that.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. And I know a lot of times people say, join the conversation, but really what it is like a webinar where you sit and listen to people talk. And that's not what this is going to be.
Right.
This is genuinely going to be a conversation
Yeah.
where we want to hear what you have to say. We want to ask our questions and let you ask yours, hear your stories. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's dive into our topic today. I know that's what people are here for.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the second part of a conversation about trust. It's been fun for me. I've already heard from several people who have listened to the first part of this and have said, yeah, but talk about repairing trust,
Right.
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 And that's totally what we're doing today. Like, what does it look like to restore trust after a breakdown or even after a betrayal? And so here's our simple but complex leadership principle. In relationships and in organizations, everything depends on trust. Understanding how trust works can help us be intentional about building trust and effective in restoring trust.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, does a pyramid of 5 things that are needed, and the foundational piece is trust. And I believe that to be true. I've experienced that to be true. If you didn't listen to the first podcast, I would encourage you to go back and do that. In that first podcast, we offered a couple of definitions of trust. One of them is making something important to us, that's important to us, vulnerable to the actions of others. And then um, we drawing from the book, the thin book of trust, and it is really, literally a very thin
And
book. Uh, he divides that into four components. Trust is built around sincerity. It's built around reliability. It's built around competence, and it's built around care.
Mm.
And what I love so much about that is trust is like this big, you know, theoretical kind of reality. And when he breaks it down, like, I trust this about you, but not so much this, that actually brings focus to the work that I need to do. And if you've listened to the first podcast, you can get some more information about that.
Yeah, and also maybe go to the website and check out the blog because we
Yeah.
have I think what we did there was kind of summarize. So if you want to grow in being more trustworthy, what are the skills you can actually work on? And so I'd
Yeah.
encourage people to go there. But today we're looking at more okay, so what if despite our best intentions or maybe not, things have really broken down and there is a sense of maybe betrayal. There's probably, at the very least, a sense of frustration. And why are things not working the way that they should? And what does it mean now that trust is eroded? And I thought maybe we could just put some ideas out there about what does this look like,
Right.
in a relationship or in an organization. And I was thinking, on the most basic level, the breakdown in trust is someone lies to you, right?
Right.
I mean, they don't just not tell the truth, although that is absolutely a breakdown in trust, but
Hmm.
they've actually lied.
Hmm.
And I think that might be at the heart of most breakdowns in trust. We break a promise. Um, when someone cons you out of something, when somebody withholds something from you to take advantage of you,
Hmm.
right? Definitely a breakdown in trust there. And I understand in some cases that's meaning making,
Right.
right? Did someone lie to me or did they just not have all the facts? That sort of thing. There's some meaning making involved, but at the basic level, I think sometimes people who struggle with trustworthiness might say, well, I didn't really lie. I
Right.
just didn't say everything there was to say. But I think, we're not trustworthy until we can name it for what it is. So those are a few basic examples. I think those show up both in individual relationships and in organizations. What are some examples you would put out there?
Well, in addition to, like, if I'm the one who's breaking trust, I lie, I don't tell, I'm not authentic and tell the truth. I think that there's also the what other people do. There's two parts to trust. And so a couple of examples that I think of. One is where we work in a number of places where leaders are very effective leaders. They're very smart. They're very creative. They're very disciplined, and they do things and make changes and introduce things without ever having any sense of what the impact is, without
Mhm.
collaborating. And so
Mhm.
you're in a relationship with me and you do something that impacts me, but you don't talk to me about that. You don't acknowledge the
Yeah.
impact.
Mhm.
That's one of the examples I think about. And the other thing when I think about trust being a two-way street is I had an experience years ago where somebody gave me some feedback about showing up as an angry person.
Mhm.
And when they said that I often seemed angry. And when I asked the question, how long have you known this? And they
Mm.
said, oh, almost since I first met you. And
Yeah.
like that was a betrayal. Like, why the heck haven't you told me that? Why have you waited a year and a half before you said that when I talk to you, I seem angry? And it
Mhm.
makes me wonder, like, I can't trust you. What else do you see that I'm not aware of? So those
Mhm.
would be for me examples that also are included in trust being a two-way street.
Yeah,
I can do
yeah.
things that break trust. You can do things that break trust.
And like we often say about systems, we all contribute. And that
Right.
doesn't mean when there is a betrayal that both people are equally responsible.
Right.
That is not what that means, right? But at the same time, to be able to say, how did we get to this place?
Hmm.
And and understand that that's more complex than that one person is the bad guy and one person is the good guy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think one thing that often happens in an organization that breaks trust is someone covers something up. Um, that happens a lot, right? We either cover
Right.
up our vulnerabilities, maybe we don't want people to see us sweat,
Right.
or we're literally covering up what's happening. So people are making decisions in the organizations without having all the facts. I think often when there's been wrongdoing in an organization and
Yeah.
then the organization covers that up,
Yep.
that is sometimes a level of breaking trust that's really hard to come back from. But we're going
It
to talk
is.
about how maybe we can do that. And then maybe just one more example, because I listened to a podcast this week
Yeah.
about this very thing. When an organization says these are our values, and
Uh,
then they, in a big way, don't show up to those values,
yeah. Yep.
that is a big breakdown in trust.
Yep.
So
Yep.
those are just a few of the examples. And I guess in that, I also want to give a disclaimer. I don't think we can go deep enough in this conversation to talk about what restoring trust looks like when there has been literal abuse involved. I just don't think we can go
Right.
that deep. That's not
Right.
what we're talking about right now. When abuse is the issue, there's so much complexity there that I just want to give the disclaimer that that's not what we're talking about, but that's also the exception, right? There
Right.
are so many other places in our life where we're constantly um, working on building trust or restoring trust or both.
Yep. That's good. That can't be said enough in the world that we live in today. Um, I'm glad that you brought that up. So, um, let's talk about breakdowns in trust. And what are the kinds of things when trust has broken down? How do we go about restoring it? Where would you start that conversation?
Yeah, maybe the starting place is it a good idea to restore trust? I
Mm,
mean, that might be the starting place. I think sometimes we want to move quickly. Some of us are wired to want to move quickly to restore trust because it makes us feel more comfortable and it restores the status quo.
right,
And we
right.
rush to do that in settings where maybe trust should not be restored. Yeah.
Or if it's going to be restored, it needs to be restored in a context of integrity where over time, I love Stephen Covey's quote that when he talks about this, he says, you can't talk yourself out of something that you've acted your way into.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, there's two things about that that are helpful to me. One is if you've acted, if you've related to me in a way that violates trust and you've been doing that for a long, long time, by you just giving your word to being different,
Yeah.
is not going to change things. And even if you are different the first two or three times, I still have those other 100 times where you weren't different.
Yeah.
You've got to change your behavior, and you've got to give time for the change in behavior to actually produce an impact in the person that you're trying to restore trust with.
That's really good. That if there have been 100 times I've shown up one way, 2 or 5 or 10,
Right,
um, examples of change are not going to make a difference. I might also turn that around to those breakdowns in trust where maybe 99 times you've shown up, with me in a trustworthy way, but
right.
that 100th time is so egregious,
Hmm.
right, that I can't get past it.
Yeah,
And I think sometimes the offender in that case feels like, "Come on."
right.
But
Yep.
I think what maybe we don't take into account in both those situations is how much breakdowns in trust hurt. I mean, they just, on an emotional level, they just hurt. And if we can't address that part of the equation, I think it's really hard to come back.
I've heard you say on a number of occasions that when you're trying to restore trust and the person who has violated the trust can actually go through the process and say, well, what I hear you saying is, and they actually get it right. They
Yeah.
actually do hear what the person is saying, but they don't get present to the impact.
Yeah.
They don't give any awareness that what this person has just said to them, the pain that it caused, the hurt that was involved in all that, and what I think what I've maybe I've inferred this from what you said, but if you can't get present to the impact, and then the likelihood that trust is going to be restored
Mhm.
is like really low and maybe not existent at all.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people feel really frustrated by that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
we've talked about it, we've been over this.
right.
Why is trust not restored yet? And I would say almost always it's because the offender doesn't yet get it,
Yeah,
or they haven't yet been able to convey that they get it.
yeah.
Until someone can really feel, you get how this breakdown affected me. You get it, and it touches you emotionally that this happened to me. It's really hard to move on, even if we check all the boxes and do all the things. Now, to go back to what you said earlier about this being a two-way street, I do want to say that is a two-way street. And I remember years and years and years ago going through a situation with betrayal where I learned a lot. And I remember after we had been through, this other person and I had been through kind of all the conversations and the tears and the questions and the answers. And we had gotten a third person to kind of mediate that. And we'd been through all of that. We'd done all the work. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to ask. I remember thinking, okay, now the ball's in my court. I have to let
Ah,
this count,
yeah.
right? I have to let all the efforts at restoring trust that I'm seeing on the part of this other person who betrayed me, I have to let it count. That's my work here.
Hmm. Yep.
And so, yeah, I think that's crucial to the process.
For our listeners, we have uh, a YouTube video on that's called the Integrity Conversation, and in that conversation, we talk about how to clean up a mess, and it's a four-step process where you acknowledge that you made a mess, you get present to the impact, which is what we've been talking about. You offer a heartfelt apology, and then you repromise.
Mm.
Over the years, I mean, we've been using that for a long time. And over the years, we have had so many people say to us that kind of process is worth the price of admission, so to speak,
Mhm.
and that it's the getting present to the impact that is really the thing that has made the difference in restoring trust or not.
Yeah.
You can do all those other things, acknowledge you didn't keep your word, offer an apology,
Well,
promise again, but it's the presence to the impact that really matters.
and to take that to the organizational level, um, I was talking to someone just this week that what they were dealing with was going back into an institution that had really let them down.
Mm,
And you could say, well, it wasn't the institution that let them down. It was these people that let them down. But those people were in leadership, and those people are still part of the institution. And it was one of those institutions that says, we're like a family and so forth. And so it reminded me of some research by Dr. David Pooler at Baylor, who studies adult clergy sexual abuse. I mean,
uh-huh.
what a thing to study, right? One of the
Who,
things
who
that,
wants to make their living doing that?
but he's doing such good work there.
Yeah,
And one of
yeah.
the things that he discovered in his research is that the the symptoms of PTSD that people show in that kind of situation um, might be tied to the response of the institution. In other words, so in this case, it's usually a church, it could be a
Right.
denomination or a nonprofit, but Well, it's the PTSD symptoms don't just come from the abuse itself. It comes from what happened when the abuse came to light. Was I believed?
Uh,
Was I supported? And I think it's important for organizations to remember.
mhm.
Sometimes we have to do this work. Maybe we weren't the offender. We weren't the
Right.
one that violated the trust. Maybe it was our predecessor or someone else in the organization. And yet we still have to stand for the organization, restoring trust. We're offering an apology maybe for something we didn't actually do, but we're doing it on behalf of the organization.
Yeah, say a little bit more about that. What coaching would you give to someone who is about to have to stand up in front of a group of people and make an apology for something that they didn't do?
So I would say, first of all, we are so sorry if is not an apology. The word if
That's great.
completely invalidates everything else.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the starting place, right?
Yeah.
To say, this is how the organization let you down, or this is how the organization violated trust. This is how, we did not live up to our values, or whatever that was. And to
Mm,
to say that clearly and to name the impact of that,
yeah.
um, I think that's what people want to see. They don't necessarily need to see the Jimmy Swaggart moment, with all the tears. That's not what people
Right. Right.
for. In fact, people are kind of suspicious of that, rightfully so. What people want to know is, can you say clearly what the breakdown in trust was?
Yeah.
And can you say clearly what the impact of that was? And then can you say clearly what's happening to mitigate that?
Yeah. That's really good. That's really good, Tricia. There's so much learning to be, particularly in a day and age where the whole landscape is just increasingly telling stories about spiritual abuse and sexual abuse that's taking place in so many religious institutions, churches, and denominations,
Mm.
and like that's just really wise counsel that you've just offered. But I hope people will listen to.
And that's the big stuff, right? But I think it applies with the little stuff too.
Yeah.
How much power does it have when a leader comes into a staff meeting and says something like, "Hey, I had a breakdown. I want you to hear it from me.
Yep.
I told you I was going to do this and I didn't do it." Or, I wanted to show up in this way and I didn't show up that way. And to just, do that work, even on a micro level, I
Yeah.
think rebuilds trust.
Yeah.
Um, I can almost hear your wheels turning, maybe because I know you so well, thinking, yeah, but let's talk about how we get into action here. Um, what are the actions that go with restoring
Yeah.
trust?
Well, I am, I mean, you, you know me really well, and I am a really action-oriented guy, but I don't want to, like, I think what this part of the conversation, these other things are getting into action, but if you don't do what we've been talking about, these action steps
Mhm.
are not going to have a lot of impact.
Good point.
But in the thin book of trust, he actually makes some suggestions. One of them, what was really helpful to me was to name specifically which type of trust was broken, right?
Mm,
Remember early in the podcast that we talked about has four components: sincerity, reliability, competence, and care.
mm,
And I may think that you really care deeply about me and that you're being very sincere, but you're just incompetent to get the job done. Or I may think you're really competent, but you don't care what the impact on me is.
right.
And so
Mhm,
I mean, so he starts out by saying, just name which kind of trust has been
mm,
broken.
mhm.
Um, and then he says, have a conversation and not an accusation. Holy moly, if I had known this when I was in my 20s, it would have saved so much heartache and heartbreak.
Yeah.
I mean, he actually suggests that you say things like, "Help me understand what this means when you said this or when you did this," rather than saying, "You messed up and you're going to have to pay a price," or
Mm,
some version of those. where you can, in the faith walking community that you and I have helped found and have spent so much time in, we used to talk about having a conversation that's invitational rather than
Yeah.
accusational. Like,
Mhm,
I'm curious, I want to know, I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to see my part.
mhm,
Um, and then what he would suggest is take responsibility for your part.
mm, mhm,
Um, like so often when we think about broken trust, what we tend to do, and what we tend to do is just, in fact, anxiety makes us look out there to find somebody to blame. And so
mm,
you have a part in this, and I want you to fix this. If trust is going to be restored, you're going to have to blah, blah, blah. And it's true that that person has contributed,
mhm,
but it's also true that you've contributed by what you said or didn't say, or what you did or didn't do. And so being able to see your part and taking responsibility
mm.
for that seems really, really appropriate.
I wondered
Um,
about that in your example a while ago when you said, the person gave you the feedback about being angry and they'd kind of sat on that for a year and a half.
yeah,
Um, so first of all, you couldn't take responsibility for something you didn't know about. And I also wonder, and this absolutely might not have been in play in that situation, but often I wonder, did someone not give me that feedback because I was either too reactive or too fragile
totally.
to tell me the truth about something, right? So it is a breakdown in trust that they didn't tell me, and my contribution might have been how I respond to feedback like that. That I just as an example.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. As I got beyond that experience, one of the things that began to kind of gurgle up for me
Mhm.
was once or twice he had tried to give that feedback to
Mm,
me, and I was so
mm,
reactive
mm,
that he held his hands up and said, "Not going to do this."
mm.
And it was a place where I was able to see what my part was.
And that's a great example. One of the things I've learned from you here, and this is a drum that I think you beat a lot, and I'm glad because it goes against maybe my natural instincts, is tell the truth,
Yeah,
right? Like, tell the truth as soon as you can, tell as much of the truth as you can,
right.
tell it as clearly and transparently as you can. Um, because often when trust is broken down and we're in that initial confusion, it's the natural thing for an individual or an institution, an organization to kind of hide, right? To
Right,
conceal things, to I mean, to just not tell the truth.
right.
And it seems like the damage that that does is really hard to overcome,
It is.
but
It
it's
is because
also
then
really hard to tell the truth.
yeah, but going forward, then if you get found out that you didn't tell the truth, and going forward, you're always living with a. So I wonder if they're telling me the truth now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And I want to say this is really tricky. I mean, I more and more these days are working with organizations that are in crisis around
right,
a
right.
breakdown in trust. And this is really tricky because sometimes there are HR issues involved.
Yep.
And you can't say everything there is to say.
Legal issues, right? Exactly,
There are legal
exactly.
issues. I was involved in one situation where it was really amazing to me. The people that had the information were not sharing it because to share the information would really hurt and even harm other people in the congregation. Those people were angry that the information wasn't being shared because they didn't realize that the information involved them. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but I
Sure,
want you to just see that double bind,
right. I
right?
mean,
That they
yeah,
were in. The people who are angry at us are the very people that we're protecting.
yeah,
And it was a mess.
well, what that makes me want to say is, I mean, we're doing these podcasts and these blogs and the uh, this online thing we're going to do. On the one hand, even in simple cases, rebuilding trust can be very complex and emotionally charged.
Okay.
And it's essential work that has to be done if you're going to build effective congregations, businesses, organizations. If you can't do this work, then it's going to be hard for you to. have the kind of reach your goals and have the kind of impact that you want to have, because trust just, as Lencioni says, is the foundation in everything about teams functioning in effective ways.
So be as transparent as you can, right?
Yeah.
I need to know. I mean, I think it's okay to share on a need to know basis sometimes,
Right.
and
Right.
sometimes to say there is more to the story. We can't share that, and we're asking you to. I mean, basically, we're asking people to dip into a reservoir of trust that they already have
Right.
for us.
Exactly.
But I think what also goes with that, and I would say I've also learned this from you, is this is the time to show up. Everything in us says run away, hide, um, you know, go in your office and close the door,
Right. Right.
avoid the people that that are angry or hurt. But to just be able to say, show up, do the little things. I think about Jesus saying, if you want to be trusted with much,
Right.
be trustworthy with little. Um, to take on those little things where we move toward the people that are angry and hurt, where we even just little things like if we say we're going to offer information at a certain time, that we do it. And if we don't
Right.
have the information to offer, that we still show up and say, I don't
We
have the
don't have it.
information. And this is
Exactly.
why. Just those
Exactly.
little ways of showing up or actions.
I was on a coaching call this morning with a pastor over on the East Coast who is in a some conflict in the life of his church, and there's some people who are really kind of taking his side, and some people who are really uh, doubting whether they can trust him or not. And it was a great aha moment for him where he said, "Wow, over the last 3 weeks, I've spent a lot of time with the people who see it the way that I do, and I've actually distanced from the
Mm,
people who see it differently."
mm,
And he promised me that he was going to move toward those people. Uh, Between now and our next coaching call, but as you said, it's the natural instinct, like blinking and breathing, to say I want to get away from that as much as I can, where maybe the foundational rule is you've got to move toward broken trust rather than moving
mm.
away from broken trust.
Yeah.
The thin book of trust gives one more thing before we run out of time, and it is that you agree on new behaviors, and so you don't say I'll do better or I'll try harder or I'll get this right
Mm,
the next time, but you make some specific kind of. I often will say I'm going to do or not do this. I'm going to say or not say this, and then
mm.
the final thing he says is remember that trust takes time, and
Yeah.
so. Uh, um, yeah, I don't think this is, you have to do this with little things, but as the bigger the violation of trust becomes, the more there may need to be periodic check-ins
Mm,
where
mm.
you come back and say, I know this happened. Like
And
the
that's
person, I'm
fine.
thinking about me as a person who violates the trust. I'm really like, I sincerely want to be a person of trust, a trustworthy person. And I've had this experience where that's been violated, to go back periodically and say, how am I doing?
Mm,
Would you promise to give me feedback if if I get back out of bounds? Um, I'm just reminded, and I think we said this earlier, you've done something 99 times and you make one change. We're not going to change deeply habitual behavior by somebody saying you ought to change your behavior, by me saying I want to change my behavior.
yeah.
It takes practice over time. And so you need to be in some kind of context that honors this process and supports and encourages you as you do this work, holds you accountable for doing the
Mm.
work. All of that seems really important in the mix of things.
It goes so much more slowly than the offending party
Oh,
wants it to.
yeah. Yep.
Right, because
Yep.
it's so uncomfortable to do what you just said.
Yeah.
We want forgive and forget is what we want.
Yeah.
We don't
Yep.
want to have to keep coming back to it and saying, "So how's it going?" But I do think it helps to think of it maybe like a bank account
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we're making deposits into over
Yep.
time.
Yeah.
And if the other person is also involved in this process and wants to restore trust, at some point there is kind of a tipping point where we break even, I think. The hurt may not go away, but the bank account is restored, right? We're not
Right.
in the red anymore.
Right.
Um, yeah. I also think about You mentioned accountability a while ago, and showing up differently over time obviously is the key. But this might be a small thing, but we have a friend who just you know, she does not mean to not show up to not do the thing that she said she would do. She does not mean to not be available, but just
Right.
ADD and really demanding life and just kind of a personality that's very people oriented, not quite so task oriented. And one of the things that she did was just to be really clear about what she can deliver. Right?
Uh,
And so so some of the people who are listening, know our friend and they know this. She just put on her email, vacation responder, it just says, basically, "I care about you and don't expect a reply in 24 hours." Like,
mm,
I'm doing the best I can. Keeping up with my email inbox is a struggle for me. Doesn't mean I don't care. If it's urgent, give me a call. But in essence, saying, "This is what you can expect from me,"
yeah. Yeah.
I think probably builds a lot of trust with the people in her life.
That
So,
makes me think of my own inattention to detail.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
like I am not a detail person, and I'm a big picture guy, and I've got a lot of gifts that I bring to life.
Mhm.
And on our team, I'm working harder at paying attention to the details than I've ever worked.
Yeah.
And our team knows that that's just not something that I do very well. And so there's a lot of grace. I
Uh-huh.
don't get judged or shamed when I miss a detail. Uh, I think acknowledging that
Yeah.
has built trust with our team.
Honestly, neither of us should really be trusted with the details, right? I mean, it I know we said trust isn't all or nothing, but,
Right,
you know,
right.
people who know us should probably just assume that they need to double check those things
Yeah, yeah,
before.
yeah. So we ought to
Yeah.
mention Megan on this call to say we've got somebody who's caring for our details these
Just
days that
helping
we
with
just
that. Yeah.
yeah.
I might just say one more thing about that.
Okay.
That one of the things that happens over time is at the end of the day, and I mentioned this on in part 1, but I wanna come back to it. At the end of the day, I have to be able to trust myself to be
Uh,
okay.
yeah.
That whether you not you personally, but whether the other
Right.
person is able to restore the trust in the relationship in the way that I wish for, whether that happens or not, I have to work on being able to trust myself to be okay. And
Yeah.
I think that only happens in that space, that time.
Yeah. That's
Um,
great, Tricia.
so
That's great. Man, this is such a rich conversation. I'm so glad we're having it, and I'm looking forward to the Zoom conversation with folks who sign up for that. Um, the thing that I'm thinking about as we come to the end of this is that everybody who's listening has places where, like, because trust is not all or nothing, where there's a need to grow trust in a relationship. And I'd really encourage you in two ways. One is pick one of those and make that a practice field and take what you're learning in these podcasts and in the blogs that we're doing, and actually, like, the way you're going to grow your capacity is by practicing. And if you've got a place where you've done everything you know how to do to rebuild trust, uh, maybe what you need is a coach.
mm,
And we've got a great team of coaches who could help you with a specific problem or challenge that you're working on. Go to our website. There's not only a list of all of our coaches, but kind of a biographical sketch of them, so you can see, who on the deal would be a good fit for you, and then reach out and ask for a coach. On April the 24th, we're going to begin a 6-month process of reading and discussing our book, The Leader's Journey. And one more thing, Tricia, that I don't know if we've said, where do they find the YouTube that's now available?
yeah, just the leader's journey, and it
Oh,
should
okay.
take you right there.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right. Great.
and you'll see our
Great.
logo there, and you'll know that's us. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
this has been a fun conversation today, and I really appreciate being able to have it with you.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's it for us today, though. So, thanks for listening, and take good care.